give me a kiss, the pill of dream.
It is September 1997. Google.com has just been registered as a domain name. Ted Turner has just donated $1 billion to the United Nations, and Honey by Mariah Carey was #1 on the billboards. Meanwhile, a massive RPG has just shook up the gaming world and invaded homes all across North America. No, it's not that one, it's this one.
Beyond the edge of reality lies a story of ultimate conquest, a story of war and friendship, a story of a love that can never be.
Final Fantasy VII. That's right, isn't it crazy in retrospect that these massive games were released so close together? Despite debuting in the shadow of one of the most successful role-playing games of all time, Fallout managed to carve out plenty of success for itself, initially with a cult following that quickly grew into a solid and passionate fanbase. So much so, in fact, that just over a year later, the highly anticipated sequel was released. A crazy turnover, especially compared to how long fans wait for sequels to their favourite games today. Fallout 2 received strong reviews upon release and was commercially successful. It was bigger than the original, bolder, cruder, longer, with more locations, quests, characters and items to collect. Yet, somewhere along the way, did the game become too bloated and lose a little something that made the original so special? Well, join us and let's find out for ourselves. But before that, I'd like to once again show some appreciation for the support you have shown Vintage Point in our first few months. The love that you all showed our Fallout 1 mega review has allowed us to grow to the point of having 7,000 subscribers, something we weren't sure would ever happen while growing at the rate we are. Thanks to your support, Vintage Point is now a YouTube partner, and that means we've been able to start a membership program called the Vintage Point Family. In exchange for your added support by joining, you'll be given early access to content and behind the scenes looks at our upcoming videos such as the Song of Ice and Fire review, and a stroll back through some crazy Godzilla flicks from the 90s. If that sounds like something you may be interested in, then we'd be massively appreciative. Again, thank you all for the constant support. It really does mean the world to us. But without further ado, Fallout 2. Fallout 2 takes place some 80 years after the original game, and quite a lot has changed in the wasteland since then. The remnants of the Master's super mutant army have been scattered across the wasteland like a handful of sand being blown to the wind. The former settlement of Shady Sands has risen up and become the budding nation state that is the new California Republic. Humanity has started to rebuild to the point that there are now multiple functioning settlements in the region. Society appears to be slowly healing, yet a new sinister force appears to be operating from the shadows. The Enclave. Ghosts of the former United States government still operating under the belief that the United States can be salvaged and restored to its old glory once more. At what cost? Well, the pure humans still living inside the vaults. When we left off, the Vault Dweller had been banished from Vault 13, the home he'd fought so hard to save. Well, in the months that followed, many of Vault 13's inhabitants willingly chose to leave the safety of their homes and follow after the Vault Dweller. In doing so, the village of Arroyo would eventually be formed and slowly grow into their own tribe. The Vault Dweller found a wife, Pat, had a daughter and settled down for a few years. He shared his knowledge of the wasteland and brought up his child as best he could, all before mysteriously vanishing one day. A while after his wife had passed, and just as his daughter had come of age to lead the tribe herself as the village elder, a role she occupied for years even as Arroyo began to fall on hard times. This is where our story truly begins. You play as the child of the elder, the chosen one. Arroyo has been hit by one of the worst droughts in years that has seen crops die, wildlife die, and many of the villages slowly wither away. You have been chosen by the Elder to go out into the wasteland and retrieve a Gek, or a Garden of Eden creation kit, a device that terraforms land to make it more habitable. The Elder read of it in the Vault Dweller's old holodisks. Now you are tasked with leaving the comfort and safety of your home to venture out into the dangerous wasteland in order to find this piece of technology to save your home forever. Wait, does that sound familiar? Right, it is the exact same premise as the first game. This has been a point used to bash Fallout 2 for years, and while I do agree that it can be seen as a lazy rehash, I think it works well enough for the greater story that is being told here. You are walking in the footsteps of the Vault Dweller. His fingerprints are felt everywhere throughout this game, even 80 years later, something we will touch on more as we progress through the world. I believe you being sent on a similar journey to him only hammers home that point more. You are the chosen one. You were chosen to walk the same path he did and match his legacy. Legacy being a really central theme throughout Fallout 2. The game begins not with you being dumped out into the wasteland, but instead being made to complete the Temple of Trials. A proving ground of sorts to establish yourself as the chosen one. This intro acts as a tutorial of sorts, giving the player a chance to use some and become familiar with a lot of the main skills in the game. Combat, explosives, lockpick, speech, etc, etc. I've always wondered what the hell this temple was. I mean, it looks medieval, too archaic to have been built just before the war, yet too advanced to have been built by a group of tribals living in tents in just 80 years. Regardless, emerging out of the temple, you are granted your title as Chosen One and given your new quest to find the Gek. I personally don't mind the Temple of Trials though. I know a lot of fans of the game loathe getting through its tedious halls and rooms, just to begin the game proper. A comparison is often made to the first game, which just dropped you in a cave with light supplies and told you to find your way, while Fallout 2 practically holds your hand by comparison. I'm not sure I subscribe to the sentiment. The temple is bothersome if you've played through the game multiple times, yet I think I would find it useful if it was my first playthrough. You are now free to explore Arroyo to your heart's content. A little poking around can lead to a few small side quests to get your feet wet. You can help the local shaman with clearing out some killer plants from his garden, aid one of the hunters with saving their dog from geckos, or find a piece of flint so your kin can sharpen your spear for you. It isn't exactly deep questing, but it gives you an idea of what to expect moving forward. I have always wondered how a group of Vault Dwellers regressed so far in such a short space of time. Within a few generations, they went from living in a facility with the height of technology to living in tents and wearing loose animal skins, hunting with just spears and adopting a full tribal culture. Regardless, you are given a Vault 13 canteen and some money by the Elder and sent looking for a trader named Vic, who seems to know the location of Vault 13. Where this Gek is assumed to be, you are pointed in the direction of a small hunting town named Klamath. Entering Klamath, you will find it to be a humble settlement made up of gecko trappers and Brahmin farmers. Speaking to some of the locals about Vic, they mention that he has a shack here in town but hasn't been seen in weeks, claiming he was heading off to the Den, the last they had seen the trader. But before we go there is plenty to see and do around town. Firstly, it is always worth visiting the Buckner House, the local trading post and saloon here in Klamath. The owner of this establishment, Maida Buckner, offers some insight on the town as well as some scathing words on another tribal found in the corner of the bar working. This is Sulik. Speaking to him, you'll find a tall man covered in tattoos, piercings and a strange bone stuck in his nose. He will explain that he comes from a tribe to the west on the Pacific coast. He came to Klamath to search for Vic too, to ask about his dear sister whom was kidnapped while on a known trading route. The trading caravan was attacked by men with magic torches whose fire killed people instantly. That sounds rather ominous. His search brought him to Klamath, and after failing to find Vic, he consoled himself with the bottom of a bottle. The booze sent him into a rage and he smashed up the bar. Without any way to pay back the damages, Sulik has been forced to work off his debt. The player can offer to pay off the remaining $350 worth of damages to free Sulik from his debt, or alternatively by speaking to Maida, she'll mention how her mother's fiancé, a local gecko trapper named Smiley, has recently gone missing in the toxic caves to the north. If the Chosen One can rescue Smiley, Maida would be willing to absolve the debt and let Sulik go free. The toxic caves are a mess of radioactive slime and a nest of golden geckos, a larger and more hostile variant on the reptile. The player can buy rubber boots back in Klamath that completely negate the radioactive damage brought on by the slime. The geckos pose a big threat so early in the game, especially when proper guns and ammo are so scarce. So if your skills can manage it, I'd recommend sneaking past the critters to try and find Smiley. Finding him in an old generator room, he mentions that he came out here to find the origins of the golden geckos, deducting that this cave was once a pre-war military facility that had leaked so much radiation to the point it mutated the geckos into a larger and more volatile breed. One of them had got the drop on Smiley and nearly took his leg clean off, before he managed to slip away into this generator room. Escorting the trapper back to the entrance will end in a very generous XP reward. Back in Klamath, the Buckner family will thank you and Smiley will even pass on a gecko skinning perk, which makes for a great way to collect caps in the early game. Now with Sulik free from his debt, he agrees to join you in your quest to find Vic. You can even ask him about that bone stuck in his nose. He explains that it is his grandfather's bone and that he can use it to contact his spirit, amongst others to seek advice. This is one of the earliest signs that Fallout 2 really goes off the wall with the deeper paranormal and spiritual side of things. This kind of stuff isn't to everybody's taste, but I love it. I feel like it gives Fallout an extra layer and is a nice juxtaposition to the heavy technology talk that is rife throughout the games. There is a few more odd quests around Klamath should you want to build up some wealth or levels before you continue on your quest. You can help Maida's brother Tor protect his Brahmin from a nasty pack of rad scorpions. Just west of town you can find a crashed vertibird, a helicopter-like craft used for transport and combat. Just beside the wreck is a corpse cladded in strange armor and possessing a yellow key card of some kind. How interesting. The wreck is guarded by a Mr. Gutsy unit that is stuck in some kind of frenzy. Having Sulik with you can make this fight a lot easier. I'm a big fan of laying seeds for late game reveals early on in your adventure, and this crash site is a great example of that. Before we finally depart Klamath, there has been whispers from the locals of a serious rat infestation. Meeting up with the lead trapper in Klamath, a man called Slim, you can try to convince him in a number of ways to try and part ways with the key to the underground warrens, where the infestation started. You can use a speech or barter check to earn the key. Alternatively, you can steal it off him or kill him and loot the body. If your chosen one is a woman, then you can sleep with Slim and gain the key that way. Funnily enough, if you feed the stray dog in the center of Klamath some jerky cutlets, he'll puke up a spare key to the warrens. There was no need for this detail to be added, but I adore the fact that it was. Venturing down into the warrens, you'll be confronted with tight cramped halls of damp stone and dirt, filled to the brim with overgrown rats. Fighting your way past them will eventually bring you face to face with the source of the infestation, the rat god, King Rat, an oversized albino rodent that has had its brain enlarged to the point of being capable of basic speech. Killing the king will finish the quest and earn a sizable XP reward, making it well worth the trouble of getting down here. Again, this quest is an example of Fallout 2 pushing the weirdness way past what the first game accomplished. We are really only touching the surface. This game gets a whole lot weirder. Moving on in your quest to find Vic, your journey has led you to the Den, a safe haven for the scum and wrongdoers of the wasteland. The town is a sanctuary of drug and slave peddlers. The town is home to a great many young children that you can find dotting around storefronts through streets. These kids act as pickpockets for some of the underhanded traders in town, such as Flick. If they get their hands on your inventory, they will take without mercy, including special quest items. All while the player is completely unprompted when this happens, making it a very dangerous game mechanic. The first place of note in the Den is Becky's Bar and Casino, a watering hole that offers gambling to weary travelers. The owner, Becky, is well loved by the community and is really one of the only true good people left in the Den. She seems to be fighting an uphill battle against the town's own reputation to make a decent home of the place. Something that is next to impossible due to Metzger, the head of a slavers guild right here in the Den. You can pick up some odd jobs from Becky around town, including debt collection from a local junkie named Fred. Funnily enough, when confronting Fred, you can either demand the full amount back, allow him to keep some, or cover the debt yourself. If you allow him to keep some, then return after a few months, Fred has won it big in the casinos and offers the chosen one a massive reward for his good faith. I love silly little details like this, as the player is rewarded for going against their better judgment for once, a notion that isn't seen often enough in my opinion. Also in Becky's place, the player can happen across a lady named Leanne, who mentions the Master. You are prompted with the option to mention that it was your grandfather that killed the Master, to which she replies by recapping the story of the Master for the price of a Nuka-Cola. I don't know why, but I really like this little interaction. It is entirely inconsequential, but it just gives the world a bit of life, knowing that there are people still living in the shadow of what the Master did, but more on that later. Further exploring the west side of town will lead you to discovering a Brotherhood of Steel bunker. For those that haven't checked our Fallout Mega review yet, or are new to the series, the Brotherhood of Steel are a group of technology-worshipping zealots that operate in an almost military-style way, while sporting medieval titles like Scribe and Paladin. They aided the Vault Dweller in destroying the Mariposa military base all those years ago, during the events of the first game, and have generally been a helping force in times of great struggle in the wasteland. Interacting with the guard stationed outside the outpost named Joshua, he will be extremely cryptic and vague, only allowing the player to ask him one question before prompting them to visit the Brotherhood outpost in NCR. How strange. Just next to the outpost is a junkyard of some description owned by a mechanic named Smithy. This is a must-stop spot for anybody doing a Fallout 2 playthrough, and that is for one reason only. Smithy is in possession of a working highwayman. A working car in the post-apocalypse is like gold dust, and here the Chosen One finds himself stood in front of one. The only catch, it is missing a key part, a fuel controller, and Smithy doesn't know where to find one. That's a damn shame, but the mere idea of owning a car in a Fallout game would incentivize new players to go delving into every area they come across in search of that fuel cell controller. Sadly, we are going to have to kiss goodbye to our new wheels for the time being and continue on our quest afoot. Moving into the east side of town, you'll find it's built around a sizable cemetery that acts as a grim reminder of what these towns have been built up from. A few small diners and bars are found over here, as well as the aforementioned Slavers Guild, a large building that is swimming with armed guards, all protecting their way of life, a penned-up collection of tribals. In here you will find the head of this cabal, a dirty rogue of a man named Metzger. Talking to Metzger, you can find out a great deal about the larger world of Fallout 2, a key point of which is the production of Jet, a highly addictive chem that has taken the wasteland by storm. Metzger wants to make himself rich by acting as a middleman between the two settlements called New Reno and Vault City, protecting the shipments of chemicals used to create Jet. If you look in the mirror in the morning and see a sociopath looking back at you, then there is even an option to join the Slavers Guild. Though you will be branded with a tattoo as a sign of your allegiance, one that many folks in the wasteland will not take kindly to. This actually locks you out of many quests in the game. Bringing up Vic in conversation will cause Metzger to quickly become irritated. He explains that he bought a radio of Vic to listen in on some conversations between the New Reno mob bosses and other settlements. But the damn thing never worked. Feeling Vic was trying to rip him off, he imprisoned the trader right here in his guild. Vic is fearful that Metzger is going to enslave him if he doesn't fix the radio. He begs the Chosen One to go back to his shack in Klamath and find a replacement he can use for parts. Doing so will allow the player to pay for Vic's release. Though if you are like us and want to clean the wasteland up the way, then you might instead opt to simply take out Metzger and destroy this whole slaving operation. I will warn you though, this fight is extremely difficult if you aren't properly equipped for it, as Metzger has a large number of allies and they are decently well armed. Though if you manage to wipe them out, then the loot you earn as well as the massive amount of XP will set you up nicely for heading into the mid-game. With Metzger dead, Vic is now free to leave. He tells the player he doesn't know exactly where Vault 13 is, but he points them toward a Brahmin dealer named Ed that works out of Vault City. Vic will also offer his services to you as a companion. Though he appears to look like much of a fighter, Vic is actually quite a useful addition to your crew. The trader has a high repair skill and will rush to fix anything that the player cannot while on his travels with you. He is also something of an endearing character, the old fat snake oil salesman that is somehow tagging along on this legendary mission. He reminds me of Nigel West Dickens from Red Dead Redemption, or to a lesser extent, Honda Onoka from Star Wars. He is unapologetically a little bit slimy and a little bit crooked, but in a likeable way. Regardless, I always find myself enjoying the company of Vic on a playthrough of Fallout 2. He has some fun interactions throughout the wasteland and even has a little back and forth with Sulik from time to time. This is another showcase of what Fallout 2 does so much better than the originals. The companions have so much more character and life than Ian or Taicho or Katja from the original game. Sulik and Vic have quests of their own and wants of their own that happen to align with the Chosen One. It makes for a much more engaging and likeable party system, and the game benefits massively from that in my opinion. I don't know if this is a hot take, but I'm not sure if any Fallout game has handled companions as well as Fallout 2 did. Not in terms of writing or their personal stories, just the mechanics of it all. New Vegas came close, but each of them felt very cornered off in their own world. There was no interaction between companions, even if they were all present together in the lucky 38-player home. Anyways, we will get to a Fallout New Vegas mega review eventually. That's just my brief thoughts on the matter. Let us know what you think. Before we leave the den, it's worth noting that mentioning Metzger's death to Rebecca will earn you a sizable reward of caps and XP, but more importantly than that, you have helped put the den on the right path to becoming a pretty decent settlement overall. You can also free the slaves that are held captive, though unfortunately Sulik's sister is not amongst them. I think now would be as good a time as any to mention that she is actually not in the game at all. She was actually cut from the game, a victim of the time restraints brought on by releasing a sequel so soon after the original game. This again was another nagging problem with Fallout 2. The game is half-baked in parts. The amount of cut content is actually staggering when you do a little bit of research into it. Fortunately, the amazing Fallout community have released a Fallout 2 restoration mod that includes a lot of this cut content back in the game, and I would highly recommend it. Though, for the sake of this video, we are only going to cover the vanilla content. So Sulik's quest is unfinished and he is never going to find his sister. Funnily enough, his sister was actually to be a character featured in the unreleased Black Isle, Fallout 3, better known amongst the community as Van Buren. There she would be a potential follower and a leader of a tribe in her own right. Such a shame we never got to experience that game, but that's a matter for another time. Back to Fallout 2. Leaving the den, we are met by a random encounter in the wasteland. A family of farmers are being hassled by a group of power armor clad soldiers. They look unlike the Brotherhood of Steel we know from the original game. The leader amongst them is a massive man, mutant thing with greenish skin and a gigantic set of his very own power armor. They try to capture the farmers for some kind of questioning but resort to killing them after being refused. We can't interact with this scene and are helpless to watch. It serves as an ominous warning of the storm that is to come. Eventually, making it to Vault City, we are met with one of the 3 large cities in the game. It doesn't take long after arriving to realize that there is a serious class divide here in Vault City, and that is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to all of the social and political problems in this place. You see, this settlement was born out of Vault 8 and built up with large walls and a cleaner and more pristine city than anything we've seen in the wasteland thus far. The citizens are neat and tidy, prim and proper, yet just outside the safety of Vault City's walls is a courtyard. A kind of slums, if you like, where the rabble that have been refused entry to the city have gathered and built up a small community of their own. This is where we find ourselves upon arriving. The courtyard isn't filled with much, weary travellers and a few odd quests here and there for those interested in building up some extra caps or XP. Visiting the local bar, we are met by the owner, John Cassidy. He's a veteran of the waste and looks every bit of it, said to have scars and bullet wounds in scores, as well as a fake eye and a steel plate in his skull. Cassidy shares his thoughts on how unfair life is in Vault City, even mentioning that the head of the city's security department smashed up his bar. After a little convincing, you can get Cassidy on board to join your party. In terms of character, he's probably one of the weaker companions as he doesn't have much about him beyond the obvious, though he still acts as a competent enough ally to have in combat. Bonus fact, he is also the father of Rose of Sharon Cassidy, the companion from Fallout New Vegas. Moving forward, the only way to gain entry to Vault City proper is by obtaining a day pass. Is this a haven from the horrors of the waste or a theme park? Regardless, there are a number of ways to gain one again, showing off how important choice is in these games. You can buy one, steal one, you can convince the guard that you are an envoy from a nearby vault, or you can simply strip off your armor and reveal the Vault 13 jumpsuit beneath. You choose how your character would gain entry. I know it sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how—
Not sure if I chose it or it chose me. Dad ran a bar a long time ago and it was a labor of love, Mom said. Didn't sound like it made her happy. Still, I'm guessing I got some of Dad's love of whiskey in me because the burn suits me fine. Used to call me Whiskey Rose back west, before I punched enough people, so now they say it, but quiet, and when I'm not around. Not much to tell. He ended up walking east one day when I was young and never came back. Not a family deserter like some, though. Mom died waiting for him, and she had me to raise. She was sick, but she held off dying until I was old enough to be getting into trouble with the boys. As for Dad, I figure he just got himself lost or dead. Happens. And I'm not all boo-hoo about it, so save your glass for someone who's crying.
Well now, I ain't seen you around before, stranger. Name's Cassidy. I run this place. What can I do for you? Vault. Only vault I know of is the one inside the city. Big friggin' hole. You can't miss it, trust me. Beer for 20, shot of whiskey for 30. Nothing special. Why, you want something? Here you go. Drink up. Might help you forget where you are.
But you'd be surprised how many role-playing games just casually skip over the role-playing part. Being given a choice that is a little bit more nuanced than good option, bad option is so welcomed. Exploring Vault City, I found it to be just as unsettling and almost too clean as the first time I played this game. The juxtaposition between Vault City and the Den is massive. The aim of the citizens was to recreate a slice of pre-war life, but it isn't quite right. It isn't the same. There is almost an eerie, uncanny valley nature about the place. Poking around, you can meet a varied cast of characters including Vic's daughter, Valerie. You get a little bit more background on him as a character, revealing that he is something of a deadbeat dad who wasn't really around for her childhood. Moving on, you also meet the aforementioned head of security, Sergeant Stark. He offers some insight on the surrounding settlements and shares his suspicions about a nearby town of ghouls known as Gecko, as well as the quickly expanding New California Republic. I personally love this aspect of the Fallout 2 world, the heavy unrest and suspicion that comes with the birth of so many different states popping up. This touches on the themes that the developers always wanted to hammer home with Fallout 2. This is no longer about the post-apocalypse. This is about the post-post-apocalypse, meaning this game is essentially about what happens after the chaos of no societal structure begins to subside and the governments and towns and laws begin to pop back up again in pockets across the wasteland. The NCR and, in this case, Vault City are two sides of the same coin when it comes to how people react to that. It is isolationism versus expansionism. Vault City has their way of life and their way of doing things, and that is only exemplified more the more you explore the city. The citizens here see themselves as above the average wastelander. Again, the class disparity here is really hammered home. They look down on you, they think they are smarter than you, they think they are stronger than you. They think they're better than you. Yet, if you look around you'll find a dozen or so servants, as they are known, working to clean the streets and carry out demeaning odd jobs. That is right, Vault City, despite acting so high and mighty, are no better than the slavers in the Den. This is a point of everything wrong with the place. She characterizes the elitist and, to be honest, racist views of those within the walls. Lynette sees you as little more than wasteland vermin and is highly suspicious of your knowledge of the Gek. Only upon revealing your jumpsuit and the Vault 13 flask Vic provided does she lower her guard a touch and begin speaking more openly with you. Again showing the hypocrisy of Vault City, into holding mentats on her, an intelligence boosting charm, something that goes completely in the face of Vault City's anti-chem laws. Vault City is elitist hypocrisy manifest, and Lynette is the face of that. Unfortunately, to find the Gek and save Arroyo, we have to access the vault here, Vault 8. To do that, we have to make a deal with the devil. Lynette needs somebody to investigate that old ghoul town, Gecko. The nuclear reactor there has been contaminating the groundwater in the area and has made several of her citizens sick. She promises access to Vault 8 should you solve the problem for her. Sounds good enough to me. Gecko is a dust bowl town built in the shadow of the aforementioned nuclear reactor. The town is inhabited purely by ghouls, many of which migrated here after the destruction of Necropolis in the original game. In fact, doing some poking around will reveal that the town falls under the leadership of Harold, that homeless mutant that played such an important part in the fall of the Master in the first game. Much like Lynette, Harold is worried that Gecko may be attacked by Vault City if the water contamination problem isn't fixed. He too begs for our help. Moving the town, you can find a mechanic by the name of Skeeter. Skeeter can actually sell you a fuel controller need to repair the Highwayman all the way back in the Den, but he won't give it to you unless you find him a super toolkit. Of course, it could never be that easy. Entering the reactor, you are met by the chief engineer, a ghoul named Festus. He explains that fixing the reactor will stop the contamination but not do much to help the Vault City or Gecko relations beyond that. He asks the Chosen One if they could take a holodisc to McClure, a member of the Vault City Council, and ask him to help optimize it. Doing so will take a little convincing, but eventually he agrees to help optimize the holodisc, noting that it would still be easier and cause less bloodshed than Vault City attacking Gecko outright. While back in Vault City, you can go speak to Vic's daughter Valerie again and purchase a super toolkit from her. Now you are all set to repair the reactor. This is a little easier if the player has a high science or repair skill, but it's still doable without. Once the job is done, you are hit with a sizable XP reward. Alternatively, if you are an evil piece of crap, you can blow up the reactor, making the entirety of Gecko hostile toward you, yet still gaining that XP reward regardless. Gotta love player choice. Continuing on, you'll be approached by a ghoul named Gordon, who presents you with evidence via holodisc that if running optimally, the reactor could actually generate way more power than Gecko needs, something they can use to leverage an alliance between Gecko and Vault City. He claims to be part of a group known as the Renewal Cult, a faction of ghouls keen to make a medical breakthrough that would allow them to become human again. An interesting idea, and one that we haven't really seen explored in Fallout again after this. I mean, if Virgil in Fallout 4 could go from a super mutant back to a human and be perfectly fine, why not ghouls too? Anyway, he points the player toward the leader of their group in the tunnels beneath Gecko, a man named Brain. Upon meeting him, you'll soon realize he's no man at all, but a giant mutated rat that can speak English. Yes, you haven't accidentally rewinded the video, there are 2 intelligent rats in this game. Yes, they are apparently brothers, and yes, it is all a big reference to the 90s cartoon Pinky and the Brain. Remember when I said Fallout 2 was filled with weird pop culture Easter eggs? Yeah. Anyway, Brain will explain a little bit more on the matter before suggesting that the Chosen try to barter a deal between the 2 settlements. Vault City gets surplus energy from Gecko. In exchange, they send medical supplies over to aid in the Cult of Renewal's quest to regain their humanity. Sounds like a win-win situation. Before heading back to McClure, I stopped by Skeeter once more and traded the toolkit for the fuel cell controller. McClure will look over the logistics of the matter and actually agree with you and the Brain. It'd be mutually beneficial to enter into some kind of alliance between the 2 settlements. Finally returning to Lynette, she will thank you kindly and actually make you an honorary citizen of Vault City, meaning you can enter Vault 8 as you like. Doing so, you will find a sleek and well-kept vault, a far cry from some of the facilities we saw in the original game. Delving through the Vault's libraries, we can find the locations of both Vault 15 and Vault 13, with a note mentioning that the latter most likely contains a second Gek that was meant for right here in Vault 8, as they had received a shipment of surplus water ships that were originally meant for Vault 13. A little ironic joke considering the whole series was kicked off by Vault 13's water ship breaking down. With that being said, our business here in Vault City is done. I always liked this area of the game and its surrounding quests. Yes, there is a good bit of hauling back and forth between here and Gecko, but the characters and writing are something just a little bit different than the rest of the towns in not just this game but the wider Fallout series. I always like comparing and contrasting the different ideologies of the world to one another, and Vault City has one of the most pronounced in the series, for better or for worse. Its uncanny streets and varied characters, both old and new, were a welcomed breath of fresh air from the usual crooked raiders and weary wastelanders, but the quest must continue, and with the fuel cell controller we picked up, it can continue a little bit faster. Meeting back up with Smithy in the den, you can now finally sit yourself behind the wheel of your very own highwayman. The inclusion of a working car into the series has been rather divisive amongst the community as time went by. It's unrealistic, they said. Fallout doesn't need cars, they argued. Personally, I loved its inclusion and just saw it as more of Fallout's 2 moreness in relation to the original game. Being so inspired by the Mad Max movies, especially Road Warrior, it just felt natural that the player would find themselves behind the wheel of your very own car eventually in the series. Besides, it isn't like you can actually drive the thing. It basically acts as a way to progress across the world map faster, as well as offering some small storage facilities. The vehicle runs on microfusion cells that can be bought from most traders in the mid to late game. Bringing the old thing out for a spin, we can discover a small mining town by the name of Redding, just away southeast of the den. The small settlement offers a number of smaller quests, most notable of which being to help clear some strange critters of the town's abandoned mine in search of an excavator chip to help one of the other 2 mines prosper. One owned by Dan McGrew, who is supported by New Reno, and the other owned by Marge LeBurge, who is supported by the NCR. This is just the tip of a tense political iceberg that is present throughout Fallout 2, for one to delve into if they so desire. Again, it is the past of the game that reiterates the themes of post-apocalypse. Settlements are growing into small states, and there is tension between those states, something we didn't really see in the original game. We will see more of this tension in New Reno and the NCR. Back to the matter at hand, Going off past experiences, we may have expected the mines to be filled with mole rats, maybe geckos, or even a nest of death claws, perhaps. Wrong. The mine is filled with aliens. Well, not aliens exactly, but that's what the locals theorize the creatures might be. They appear to be small, slimy, almost reptilian looking, with no visible features outside of a massive mouth of razor-sharp teeth. These are actually known as wanamingos. They bear a strong likeness to the xenomorphs from the Aliens movies and even act in a similar fashion, attacking in packs and hatching out of eggs. Clearing out the mine can be very difficult. I'd recommend bringing some tough gear, plenty of stim packs, and a full party if you can. To finish the quest, you have to clear out the vermin, including the Queen Wanamingo, and smash her eggs. After that, you are free to take the excavator chip and align yourself with whatever faction you so choose. Around Reading there is a few more odd jobs you can pick up for caps, including working as a stand-in lawman for the injured Sheriff Earl Marion. These jobs include a reenactment of the plot of Unforgiven, as well as evicting a poor old widow and putting an end to a local gang known as the Morton Brothers. So a fun mixed bag if you want to hang around Reading for a touch longer. The next major location you may happen across is, you guessed it, another mining town. Sure is a lot of mining going on in this game. Jokes aside, the town of Broken Hills is actually one of my favourite locations in the game. The town was originally an old prospecting settlement that was rebuilt after the war by a super mutant named Marcus and a Brotherhood of Steel paladin named Jacob. Marcus is now the sheriff and leader of the settlement, and talking to him will give plenty of background about the area. Just a sidebar, but Marcus has always been one of my favourite characters in the Fallout series. As one of the most intelligent mutants, he really gives a great insight into what life was like for them during the times of the Master's army, and how that ideology was viewed by the mutants within it. Plus, the performance given by Michael Dorn in voicing Marcus is superb and gives the character so much life. He explains that Broken Hills has been a safe haven in the Wastes, where humans, mutants and ghouls can all live in peace, not threatened by hatred or bigotry. Exploring the town, you'll find that to be the case. There are several mutants, ghouls and humans all found seemingly living together, a far cry from the original game where the ghouls were kept isolated in Necropolis for the most part, while the mutants acted as the boogeyman, that threat constantly lurking in the shadows. In one of the bars here in Broken Hills, you can...
And we became friends, headed off together. Then, other people started following us. Guess they figured if they weren't safe with a mutie and a steel knight, safe just wasn't going to happen.
You can find a super mutant named Francis who challenges folks to an arm wrestling contest. Defeating the super mutant is no easy feat and requires at least 9 strength and 9 endurance. Upon doing so, you are rewarded with a power fist, a really effective unarmed weapon, but if you lose, well, I won't say what happens here, but let's just say it is a glaring example of the classic Fallout game's dark humour. Snooping around town a little further, you'll soon uncover a conspiracy between the mutants and the humans. It'd seem all is not so harmonious after all. A local named Jacob feels strongly that Broken Hills is under threat by the mutant inhabitants and thinks it is only a matter of time until they snap and rise up again, like they did all those years ago. He has caused quite a stir and even worked some of the locals onto his side, resulting in Marcus making multiple arrests. Jacob attempted to blow up the mine's air purifier and collapse the tunnels on top of the mutant workers. He is constantly blaming the mutants for the multiple missing humans around Broken Hills as of late, and mentioning that to Marcus, he will ask for your aid in getting to the bottom of the whole thing. I love this. It feels like the natural next step on from where we last left off to human-super mutant relations at the end of Fallout 1. Their master was defeated and their army was broken and cast to the winds without a real purpose. The mutants went from being the wolves attacking sheep in Fallout 1 to being little more than lost sheep themselves in Fallout 2, trying to adjust to this new way of life within a society they failed to bring down. That resentment obviously still lingers even all these decades later and is becoming something of a powder keg ready to explode right here in Broken Hills. Marcus points you toward a local named Dan, whose wife has been missing for days. Speaking to him, he admits that his wife was often a little too outspoken about her disdain for ghouls and super mutants alike. He begs the Chosen One to find her and bring her back home. The search proved futile around town until he finally delved into the tunnels underneath Broken Hills and uncovered what looked like a mass grave of human remains, Dan's wife included. She has a letter on her body that acts as evidence that Francis was the killer and mentions the mine's foreman Zawis as an accomplice. Confronting Francis, he admits to everything, but explains that he didn't kill random people out of hatred for humans. He was a firm believer that they could live in harmony, but felt that was being threatened by bigoted humans. These are the folks he killed in an attempt to quell the conspiracies. The Chosen One can choose to kill Francis then and there, or exile him from Broken Hills forever, which accepts as a just punishment. Marcus and the rest of Broken Hills are disappointed that the tensions boiled down to murders, but he is thankful you lent his town a hand. If you also choose to help repair the mine's purifier and finally leave the town in peace, Marcus will decide that he might be too old for settling down and offer to join the Chosen One on their quest, making Marcus the first super mutant companion in the series' history. That wraps up the major business in Broken Hills and sets us on our way toward the major settlement in the game, New Reno. To borrow a phrase from old Ben Kenobi, New Reno is a hive of scum and villainy. The city is a den of vices, from gambling to chem use, boxing to adulting. If you want to cut loose in the wasteland and have got the caps for it, then New Reno will welcome you with open arms. The city has no government nor a real law system. It is controlled by 4 crime families, something akin to the mob, I guess. They are the Mordinos, a family of slavers and chem pushers. The Bishops, the other major family in the city, has a major stranglehold on the production and distribution. Of jet into the wasteland. Just under these 2 families we have the Salvatores, the oldest family in the city, and one who has seen their power and influence wane with the years. They are eager to change that, however. Finally, we have the Wrights, the weakest family in Reno. They are made up of Orville Wright and his countless children. What little power and influence they have comes from their brewing and distribution of alcohol through Reno. I won't go in depth with the overlapping and intricate quests you can follow between these warring families, as they are some of the best in the entire game, and maybe the entire series. I believe they are best experienced for yourself, so please I implore you to just try it out. You will not be disappointed. Besides becoming a made man with one of the crime families, there are plenty of other side activities you can do in Reno, including becoming a prize-fighting boxer and taking part in high-stake bouts. This is a really fun diversion from the main quest, and I recommend looking into it. The citizens and even the families around Reno will treat you with the utmost respect if you can go all the way and become the champion. Strangely, you can also try your hand at becoming a, well, film star while here in Reno. Look, caps can be tight when you're investing in new late-game gear. Who am I to judge you how you go about getting them? There is another funny encounter in the city if you leave your car unattended for a time and return. You'll find that out after you're being carjacked. Shaking down the local street dealers, you can find out about a garage outside the city. Raiding said establishment, you will indeed find your highwayman about to be picked down for spare parts. You can wipe out everybody there, or you can intimidate or persuade the mechanic into actually upgrading the car for you. One more curious encounter you can discover is by speaking to one of the Wright children. They will explain to you that they are playing a game initiating the metal people that fly the metal insects that they see in the desert. The Chosen One can trade the kids an unloaded pistol if they show you these metal men. The kids escort you out into the desert where you can view a secret meeting between the Salvatore family and the Enclave. Those hulking figures we met in the wasteland all that time ago, and they are emerging from a working vertibird. It looks exactly like the one we saw crashed all the way back in Klamath. Turns out the Salvatores are trading supplies to this mysterious faction in exchange for high-powered laser weapons that they can use to reclaim Reno. This was such a cool hidden encounter that is very easy to miss during a playthrough. It gives the Salvatores and the Enclave a little more character beyond just being generic bad guy villains. These factions have wants and needs and are willing to begrudgingly do business if it means they mutually benefit from each other, at least in the short term. Plenty of folks in Reno would talk ill of the new California Republic and mock them as some uptight ghost of pre-war life trying to come back from the dead. Visiting the NCR yourself, you'll be met by probably the most up-to-date and well-established settlement in, well, the whole Fallout series. Outside the city, you'll find what could nearly be described as a sub-settlement made up of those that didn't gain entry to the city or just wanted to set up shop outside it. These folks are a touch rougher around the edges than those found within the walls and mostly included weapon dealers, chem peddlers and slavers. Moving inside the city, you will find that this new California Republic is actually Shady Sands, the minor farming village you visit at the start of the original game. 80 years later, it has grown into the biggest powerhouse in the wasteland. Exploring the city, you can find a number of quests and interesting characters, including another Brotherhood of Steel outpost. who again mysteriously deny you access beyond asking a single question. The Chosen One can also happen across a statue erected in tribute to the Vault Dweller, to their grandfather, for the help he had provided to Shady Sands all those decades ago. I loved this inclusion as a nod to the original game, as well as reaffirming that theme of legacy present throughout the game. You are laying eyes on the man you are quite literally following in the footsteps of. In fact, exploring the Congress Hall, you can meet the character that had actually met the Vault Dweller. Tandy, or President Tandy as she is known now, is the little girl we saved from the Khans in the original game. Now an elderly lady, she's the leader of the new California Republic and the reason that the settlement grew from such a small farming community into the juggernaut that it has become. Speaking to Tandy, the Chosen One can dig up a lot of information on the Vault Dweller and his quests in their old Shady Sands, as well as some local history on the region and its relationship with other settlements like Reno and Vault City. You see the NCR's ideology is to expand and bring as many settlements in New California as possible into the Republic's fold. The aforementioned settlements are obviously opposed to this and want to stay independent. On the home front, however, there are other problems. Tandy needs the Chosen One's help to salvage some important technology from the nearby Vault 15. The only problem, it has been settled by squatters who refuse to let people enter under any circumstance. Saddling up, we can drive out to Vault 15, again another location from the original game, and find that it is indeed full of squatters living out front of the vault. And they want nothing to do with outsiders. That is all but one, a woman named Rebecca. She comes to us in secret and explains that the squatters are just a front to hide the growing gang of raiders inside the vault, known as the New Khans, and they have locked up her daughter Chrissy, a young adventurous kid who happened across the wrong meeting. She begs for your help and explains that the leader of the squatters, Zeke, won't do anything. Typical. Squashing the Khans must be a genetic thing. We find Chrissy locked up in a nearby building. There are a number of ways to break her out. You can use good old sneak and lockpick. You can convince the guards that you were sent by the boss to order her release. You can plain intimidate them into freeing her, or you could just do it the old-fashioned way, blood and guts. Now, as to how you save her, if Chrissy is returned home, we become friends to the squatters and Zeke will even grant you a key card to enter the vault, but warns you that the leader of the New Khans, Darion, is tough as they come. Well, Zeke ain't telling lies. Darion is one of the tougher encounters in the game if you are unprepared. He has a flamethrower and a whole room full of goons, making it a very condensed fight. I'll suggest bringing grenades or some kind of area of effect weapon. Crushing the Khans and returning to Zeke, you can convince the leader of the squatters that his people would be more safe if he allowed the Republic to annex Vault 15 and bring them under the NCR umbrella. With Vault 15 concluded, we can return to Tandy and share the good news. She thanks us and finally shares the location to Vault 13, the location we have been scouring the waste for all this time. But before we leave the NCR, there are a few cool side quests you can pick up around the city if you so choose. My favourite of which is given by the Desert Rangers, an organised militia of sorts here in town, independent of the NCR military. They want your help freeing the slaves just outside the city limits. Doing so will earn you plenty of favour in the NCR, and even make you a Desert Ranger in your own right. And earning a neat little Ranger pin just to prove it. Just some bonus fun facts. The Desert Rangers were founded by Seth, the lookout in Shady Sands during the original Fallout. The group was eventually merged with the NCR's own branch of Rangers, a union that was symbolised with this statue in Fallout New Vegas. God, I love lore. Making the journey to Vault 13, the starting point of the entire Fallout series, you may be shocked to find that it is devoid of any Vault Dwellers. In fact, it is inhabited by a pack of Deathclaws, and they are friendly, and they speak English. Again, Fallout 2 is weird. The Deathclaws welcome you into the vault and promise no harm as long as you don't disturb the peace or threaten the pack. Their leader, a Deathclaw alpha named Gruthar, explains that the Enclave had attacked Vault 13 and kidnapped what was left of the Vault Dwellers there, leaving this pack of intelligent Deathclaws behind to cover up the attack. Gruthar resented the Enclave for the experiments they performed on his kind, and have rebelled against them and vowed to help his pack as well as any other weary travellers that happen across the vault, in an effort to make up for his part in the attack on Vault 13 and its people. These Deathclaws don't just speak English, they come across as extremely intelligent and even philosophical at times. Gruthar is doing what is best to protect his family, just like we are doing what is best to protect ours. Exploring the vault some more, it seems like a number of human wastelanders also call Vault 13 home, explaining that they were taken in by the Deathclaws and protected, fed, and even cared for. calling the vault a safer home than any other settlement in New California. You can speak to Gruthar's son, an albino Deathclaw by the name of Goris. The Deathclaw hides his identity under a large robe and explains that he has been traveling the wastes in disguise, learning about different cultures and ideologies in an attempt to help his pack better traverse the society that was quickly springing up around them. If the Chosen One has good karma, you can even offer to travel with Goris and he can join your party. I can't lie, having a Deathclaw as a follower is really neat. In fact, Goris is to date still the only Deathclaw companion in the main series game. Exploring the vault further, you can find out a little more backstory about what happened after the original game. The Overseer Jackarin was overthrown and a large number of Vault Dwellers left the Vault to join the hero of Vault 13 and eventually form your tribe of Arroyo. Those that remained vowed to never elect another Overseer. So with the help of the Brotherhood of Steel, they built a computer capable of automatically running the Vault for them. Speaking with Gruthar further, he will ask you for your aid. The Deathclaws can't work the computers in the Vault as it was obviously designed for humans, so they've been relying on a voice recognition device to operate the Vault. Only much like a certain other piece of tech in Vault 13, it is broken down. Finding a replacement voice module will allow Gruthar to offer you Vault 13's Gek as a reward. The replacement can be purchased from a trader in New Reno or picked up from the Vault storage room in Vault City. With the repairs complete, the Chosen One can finally at long last get his hands on the Gek and return to Arroyo as the hero they were chosen to be. After braving the wastes, the gangs, the slavers, the crime families, the aliens, the monsters and everything in between, finally, the Chosen One can rest. Nope, no. Of course not. Much like the original game, just when you think you've completed the game and your quest is finally over, you are thrust back out into the wasteland to find and defeat the ultimate evil. In this case, returning to Arroyo, you will find your home has been razed to the ground and your people kidnapped by the Enclave, that same power armor-clad force from before. The only survivor left in the village is Hakunin, who is in his final moments. He beckons the Chosen One to save their people by chasing the shadows south. So, south we must go, and that leads us all the way to the massive city of San Francisco, a town that is caught in a power struggle between the Shi, the ancestors of the surviving soldiers that washed up on the beaches of San Fran in a Chinese submarine after the Great War, and the Herbologists, a faith that believes it is only a matter of time before they are called to the heavens to live amongst the Star Father on the planet Quetzal. Yeah, again, remember when I said Fallout 2 was weird? That's only the start of it. All the while this is happening, the player is confronted with a beef between two kung fu fighters here in the town by the names of Dragon and Lo Pan. That's right, Dragon and Lo Pan. No, I know what you are thinking, and I can promise you that this is still a game about the struggles of humanity growing in the wake of atomic devastation, with the ghosts of old Americana still lingering, and not a Jackie Chan kung fu flick from the 70s. In fact, you can even offer to help either side. Helping Dragon results in you doing a sick training montage and challenging his 5 students before eventually getting to fight him in a climactic final battle. You know what? Forget what I said. This is a kung fu flick now. If you are on the brink of defeating Lo Pan, the slimy bastard will actually pull a gun on you. Finally beating him will bring the honor of kung fu back to San Francisco. Wait, what were we doing about saving our tribe again? Back to the mission at hand. Continuing to poke around San Fran can lead us to finding the third and final Brotherhood outpost and its carer, a Brotherhood knight by the name of Matt. He is concerned about the Enclave and their vertibird technology, fearing that it could turn the tide against the Brotherhood in the inevitable future conflict between the two factions. Fallout 3. Matt informs you about a hidden Enclave base on the coast called Navarro, and tasks you with sneaking in there to steal the vertibird plans. Alternatively, you can also take this quest from Shi or the Herbologists in order to gain favor from them. Exploring San Fran some more to gear up before leaving for Navarro, the Chosen One can stumble across an old tanker known as the PMV Valdez. The tanker is inhabited by a group of vagrants and led by a man named Ron Mayers, the self-proclaimed captain of PMV Valdez. Talking to the captain, he explains a little about his own background, admitting that he was once an Enclave technician stationed at Navarro, but deserted once he realized the Enclave weren't actually working towards the restoration and continuation of the United States, but actually just a continuation of the wealthy and powerful keeping their resources to themselves and toward their own benefit. Explaining your own quest to Mayers, he'll explain that the main Enclave base is actually an oil rig that is located off the coast of California. The tanker is most likely the only way to get there and back, but the boat is broken down and in serious disrepair. If the Chosen One can repair the tanker and help out the vagrants, Mayers agrees to ferry the party out to the oil rig to save the Arroyo villagers. With that being said, it is high time we ventured out to Navarro to see what this enclave base has to offer. Going to the location marked on your map, the party will stumble across an isolated Poseidon gas station, occupied by a lonesome man named Chris. Talking to him, he'll very quickly come across as nervous and a tad bit jumpy. Pushing the conversation, you are able to pull the information out of him regarding the base's location via persuasion or intimidation. If all else fails, you can always just vaporize Chris and dig through the gas station yourself. Finding a back exit that leads straight to the base, and wow, it is a wonder the place could even be hidden. Navarro is chock full of power-armored soldiers, technicians and scientists alike, all working under the Enclave banner. Brute force isn't recommended on this one, there are simply too many enemies and too much firepower. A decent speech or charisma skill will allow you to masquerade as an Enclave soldier that has just been transferred in from the oil rig. When spotted without a uniform, you'll be brought to the attention, and I cannot stress this enough, possibly the greatest character in Fallout history, Sergeant Arch Dornan. I'm not even going to explain what happens, just roll the damn tape. You were escorted to a barracks in order to suit up, finally getting our hands on that sweet Enclave power armor.
Welcome to Camp Navarro. So you're the new replacement. You are out of uniform, soldier. Where is your power armor? Don't have any? You expect me to believe that, maggot? The truth is, you lost an expensive piece of Army-issue equipment. That suit is going to come out of your pay, and you will remain in this man's army until you are 510 years old, which is the number of years it will take for you to pay for a Mark II powered combat armor you have lost. Report to the armory and have a new suit issued to you, then report back to me, Private. Dismissed!
Much suspicion as long as we don't step too far out of line. Checking out the labs, we can come across a scientist by the name of Schreiber, who is having trouble with one of his intelligent deathclaws named Zahn. Schreiber wants the beast executed, and you can offer to help. Alternatively, you can steal a passkey from the scientist and help Zahn escape into the wilds. I always like this short little side quest. It sheds a bit of light on the intelligent deathclaws and helps establish that connection further between them and the Enclave, giving us a look at the abusive relationship that Gruthar mentioned back in Vault 13. Also in Trevor's labs, you can find a cyborg dog called K9. The pooch appears to have had several body parts replaced mechanically and even had vocal parts installed, meaning he can communicate with the Chosen One. Speaking to the dog, he will explain that his master, Schreiber, was deeply cruel and malicious towards animals. This led to K9 biting him and in turn having the motors in his legs disabled. K9 asks for help repairing his limbs and dealing with Schreiber. Moving back topside, you can find the vertibird hangars and the Enclave's chief mechanic, Raoul. With a high speech stat, you can convince Raoul that one of his colleagues has asked for his help on the other side of the base, making him leave his post momentarily. This gives just enough time to nab not only K9's leg motors, but also the vertibird schematics that several of the major factions are after. Scooting back to the labs, you'll be faced with killing Schreiber before you can repair K9. Luckily, the lab is soundproof, so as long as the dork doesn't escape after you attack him, you won't raise any alarms by taking him out. Finally, repairing K9 will make it recruitable as a follower and a valuable member of the party if you still have room. Before finally sneaking back out of Navarro, it is worth digging through the captain's quarters if you have the sneak or speech skill high enough to not get caught. This will result in you finding a tanker FOB, a necessary part in repairing the PMV Valdez. That really concludes our time in Navarro. I always loved this part of the game. The sneaking, the subterfuge, it was almost like an appetizer of what was to come when it came to facing the Enclave. You get to see the power they possess up close, yet realistically you can't do anything about it. It was always something to look forward to in any playthrough. Returning to San Fran, you have your choice of who you want to give the vertibird schematics over to. Giving them to the Brotherhood will grant you full access to their facilities across California, but giving them to the Shi or the Herbologist will result in you gaining access to the necessary fuel to power the tanker. You can still get the fuel without siding with either faction, but you must rescue one of the vagrants from the sub-levels of the tanker that is filled with FEV, infected monsters of all shapes and sizes. Making a quick run back to Vault 13, we can pick up a set of navcom parts, the final piece of the puzzle when it comes to repairing the tanker. I personally didn't ever like the blind fetch quest that came with this part of the game. A little bit more expansion or character would have gone a long way in making these chores a little more fun. Regardless, the PMV Valdez is now fully operational and you are free to sail once more into the breach. The cutscene that plays as you depart the San Fran harbor by sunset and arrive at the oil rig in the dead of night never fails to give me goosebumps and really does plenty of service in setting up the final chapter of your story. The tanker docks, and it is now up to you and just you and this ragtag band of wastelanders to put an end to the Enclave once and for all. The oil rig itself has a tense, cold atmosphere. The music meanders along and causes all the hairs to stand up on your neck the deeper you manage to fight through the base. The Enclave soldiers pose a real threat. They are highly armed and more than willing to die to protect their home and their ideals. Terminals can be found throughout your journey that shed some light on the Enclave and their plans. One entry in particular explains their ultimate goal. The Enclave have successfully modified the FEV to act as a toxin. They tested their new bioweapon on both the Aurora villagers and the citizens of Vault 13, finding that the tribals would always die, where the more pure Vault dwellers had a much higher chance of survival. The plan is in place to release the toxin over the wasteland via jet streams and cleanse the wastes of all the impures in an attempt to finally reclaim America. Holy shit, that is crazy. The horrifying revelation of the Enclave's true plans only make the rest of the journey through the rig more tense. Dropping down onto the detainment level, we can find the village elder from back home, along with most of the other survivors of both the attack on Arroyo and Vault 13. The elder explains that the Enclave has been experimenting on them, and their numbers are quickly dwindling. Telling her you have a ship docked at the rig, a plan is hatched to destroy the generator which will power down the cells, allowing the prisoners to flee back to the tanker. The tension is palpable as you descend further into the rig, eventually finding yourself in the presidential wing where you come face to face with the President of the United States of America, Dick Richardson. The conversation is a wealth of lore for you to explore at your will, including him confessing that the vaults weren't a safe haven from the Great War like they were advertised. No, they were all a social experiment, a grand conspiracy between Vault Tech and the United States government to test humanity's will under certain circumstances. Some vaults were programmed to open early, some were filled with all men and no women, some all women and no men, some tested the effects of white noise, some tested the effects of abusive leadership, some tested the viability of cryostasis on the human body. The President also doubles down on what we learned from the terminal. Their plan to spread the modified FEV around the world isn't just ready to launch, it is already in the process of being used, and we have but 30 minutes to stop it. Killing the President isn't mandatory, but I always like to put him down, like a post-nuclear John Wilkes Booth. Taking an access card off his body will allow us to enter the sub-levels and meet the oil rig's chief engineer, Tom Murray. We can intimidate Tom into shutting down the reactor, or kill him and try to do it ourselves. He warns us that rushing the shutdown could be disastrous, but what choice do we have? Surely enough, the reactor goes into meltdown and we are given a 10-minute timer to get the hell off the oil rig. Making our way back the route we took, we can see that the prisoners have successfully escaped the detention level, and it is complete chaos as the Enclave realizes what is happening. Just before we hit the last room before we can escape on the tanker, the group is cut off by a group of elite Enclave troopers led by Sergeant Granite. The sergeant warns that Frank Horrigan had set up just past them and is waiting to halt your escape from the oil rig. A quick reminder, Frank Horrigan is the genetically modified special service agent that we encountered in the waste all the way back at the start of our adventure. It felt like a deal with destiny that we'd meet again, and here we are. You can fight your way past Granite and his squad, or with a high speech skill you can convince him that the Enclave is dying and their orders are futile. They decide to go AWOL and join the Chosen One in his last battle. Frank Horrigan is a beast of a final boss, and though he lacks the nuance of the Master from the original game, he makes up for it in his imposing presence. The fight is brutal. Not only is Horrigan the toughest enemy in the game, he also has a batch of security turrets that join the battle. A high science skill can allow you to hack the turret and turn them on Horrigan. Defeating the mutant Enclave soldier will result in one of the most satisfying death animations in the series, and mark your final escape from the oil rig, sailing away with the rescued prisoners as the base detonates in the background. Arroyo is saved. Vault 13 is saved. The Wasteland is saved. The Chosen One followed through on their destiny and walked the same path as their ancestor, the Vault Dweller, matching and maybe even exceeding their legacy. The death of the Enclave spells the end of Fallout 2. Fallout 2 is one of those special games to me. Is it perfect? No, it's probably not. It is heavily oversaturated in shoddy humour and real-world pop culture references. The tone of the original game is bastardized in a sense with this sequel, yet in the 25 years since its release, that is really one of the only major complaints that people have used against Fallout 2. In many ways, it surpasses the original and builds on the great foundation that it put in place. The characters are better, the story is more nuanced, the factions and the politics of the region are layered and deeply interesting. The variety of locations and quests make the world feel so deeply lived in and alive with all shapes and sizes of life. The writing of this game was so good. The lore so deeply meaningful that it's still being called on to this day in the Fallout series, despite releasing 2.5 decades ago and by a different developer than the current games. Even much of Amazon's new Fallout series enjoys the fruits that were planted by the seeds of Fallout 2 all those years ago. Is Fallout 2 the best in the series? Probably not, yet it is the game I find myself coming back to the most. I've always felt the mark of a great piece of art is knowing that you can return to it and experience something new as if it were the first time you'd laid eyes on it, and I feel like that sums up Fallout 2 perfectly. This video is already well over an hour long, and I didn't touch on half the side quests and other tidbits available to you. Not because I didn't want to, mind. No, I omitted parts of the game because I want you to go and play it all for yourself. I implore you to let Fallout 2 grab you in the same way it grabbed the rest of us, whether that be those that were there on day one in 1998, or, like me, those that stumbled upon the game in subsequent years. You will not regret it, I promise you. And that is it, folks. We can finally breathe. Fallout 2 is in the books, and I really hope you enjoyed the video and can appreciate the labour of love that it turned out to be for one of my all-time favourite games. If so, then we will greatly appreciate any support you can show us. Whether that is becoming a channel member, liking the video, or even leaving a comment on your thoughts, your interactions are always welcomed and appreciated. Until next time, stay safe, folks.